It starts with a murder, bitch.
We start off with Velma giving us her character introduction, where she all but says, "I'm not like other girls," before there's an announcement that another girl has been found murdered. It seems like they got tired of the whole murder reveal thing, because the discovery of the third victim happens off screen. At a, what do you call this, press conference, I guess? The mayor announces that since the new girl was murdered while Fred was in jail, he has been exonerated.
Are there any more questions?
Yeah, I have one. How come no one ever cared this much about my missing mom?
Velma's character remains consistent by trying to spin every situation into being all about her. What they should be holding a press conference for is the mysterious disappearance of the Scooby-Doo characters, because they sure as hell aren't in this show.
At approximately 1400 hours, state and federal authorities uncovered a duffel bag in the woods. Said bag contains 24 hours of Scooby-Doo episodes.
Excuse me, what episodes? The Spacey Space Kook? Which is
yes,
which?
all of them.
Who I'm guessing is the sheriff, just because he looks like Tommy Lee Jones by way of George Bush Jr., says they have had a breakthrough in the case by all three murder victims being hot. I would like to reaffirm that the third murder victim has up until this point not been named, shown, or given any details about to the audience. It's like they got bored or something, which I'd believe because it's clear by now that these writers really hate this show and these characters. And HBO thought this was the show to try and win some good faith after they completely dropped the ball, tripped on their laces, and face planted into the nearest dumpster when, I would like everyone to know, Unicorn Warriors Eternal has just been sitting there. Do you guys have any idea what it's like to watch Velma, knowing how good Unicorn Warriors is? You guys better watch Unicorn Warriors when it comes out. I want my season 2.
From the mind of Gendy Tartakovsky comes a new animated series, a lifetime in the making. Unicorn Warriors Eternal.
Anyway, getting back to HBO's backwash. Because of funding problems, instead of trying to protect every hot teenage girl in town, the police want to rank the 5 hottest girls and will be giving them a police escort. Not to bring real-world US politics into this too much, but this seems really at odds with the show's angle. Isn't one of the major criticisms of the American police force that they are overfunded and should not have so much money they can afford military-grade weapons? And as much as this show likes to joke about the lack of school funding, which is a real concern, doesn't their ACAB stance in this case conflict with their own plot? This is a small detail, but I think it's just like the weird Tumblr diatribe I went into in the first part. It shows a level of insincerity from the writers and how they're once again trying to wear the skin of a progressive millennial or Gen Z kid, but has absolutely no personal connection to any of these issues. In episode 3, Velma asks why the girls have to attend self-defense classes when the boys don't have to attend Don't Kill Girl classes, and the principal says due to terrible school funding, she can't afford to try and undo centuries of toxic masculinity, which is not what toxic masculinity is, but we'll give up trying to slay that dragon today. So the show makes a joke about the lack of funding in high schools as being the core problem. Okay, but then for the sake of the plot in this episode, the cops are also underfunded? So, are they saying the US should give the cops more funding? This is why if you're trying to make a satire, you should have some knowledge about the topic you are satirizing.
Wait, so a couple of middle-aged white dudes are gonna decide which of us are hottest?
Okay, so how long before they make a joke about that's what Facebook was made for? Because I'm already bored by the reference and they haven't even made it yet.
Fine, though don't forget that ranking hot girls is exactly how the Trojan War and Facebook started.
There it is. Also, damn it! You could have just said the Trojan War. That was funny! You had a funny joke and you killed it! So through shenanigans of her mouthing off at this whole thing, Velma has to be the person who is going to rank the 5 hottest girls in school who will get a police bodyguard. Daphne runs over to thank Velma for agreeing to make the list, they hug, and Daphne reminds us that Velma and her agreed to just stay friends. I know I'm the wrong person to make this observation, but I am completely baffled by the concept of, "Oh, we were terrible as friends and our friendship doesn't work and is awful, so let's become romantic partners instead." Is that how that works? Is that a thing? Is that how that thing works? Help me out here, LO friends.
What are you doing?
I'm ending our friendship.
Daphne reveals she has finally made enough money to hire a personal investigator to help her track down her parents. Velma, for the first time, decides that she's annoyed that Daphne doesn't try and hire her because she's a detective, but Daphne says Velma has enough on her plate and their relationship is messed up enough already. This is probably a good call because so far Velma has proven to be a terrible detective, most often ignoring evidence in favor of bias confirmation. Velma immediately tries to bum off the hot girl list onto Daphne because Velma can't think of the other girls as hot because compared to Daphne, they're all hideous to her. See, personal bias interfering with investigation and critical thinking.
1, I hate making lists, and 2, oh, now this is a list.
Okay, that one was funny. Good job, show. You've made 2 jokes that work so far. Olivia interrupts, letting them know that the various girls at school are ready to do anything to get on the hot girl list. You know, all 4 of the pre-established girls. I wonder who's gonna end up on the list. We're then treated to a montage of the popular girls trying to hoe it up for Velma so they can get picked. I haven't been playing it because of copyright, but so far every episode of Velma has had some or other pop song in it. When I got to this episode, I remember thinking to myself that this show is so on the nose and trite, it wouldn't be out of character for them to start playing Feel Like a Woman by Shania Twain.
Let's go, girl.
After one of the hot girls causes an accident involving the school band, Norval comes to Velma to tell her to make the damn list already. Velma says she's struggling and this is the first time she's had enough time to focus. Also, Velma is in the school band. By the way, this is a newly introduced fact in this episode.
And the hot girls are distracting because you recently came out and get too turned on to focus? Got it, copied.
You know, at the start of this show, I was willing to categorize Norval in the same level as Fred, where he's not likable, but he's a step above the other main characters. But no, Norval's just as awful as Velma and Daphne. He's just awful in a far less aggressive or overt way. Oh geez, how do I even summarize the next dialogue exchange? I'm just gonna tell you so we can move on because it's such a barrage of awful all at once, it makes me feel like I'm fighting Kenshiro. Velma says she can't make the list because she likes Daphne. Norval comments about Velma being gay. Velma says she's not gay because she also likes Fred because, again, this show seems weirdly resistant to the concept of bisexuals. Norval asks how Velma would explain Daphne's personality so that he can emulate it so he can get Velma to like him instead. Velma says this is the problem with men, they make everything about what they want. Norval says,
Not me, I'm an ally.
Velma then says girls are taught from childhood what being attractive is and she's not it. She then says,
Every little kid knows how to draw a penis, but make a little kid draw a vagina and what happens?
You go to jail?
You know what, let's skip the rest of the scene and move on, shall we? Velma meets up with Fred so she can ask him to help her with the list. Fred agrees because he correctly identifies this as charity work and how it can help him repair his public image.
Yes.
This is another joke which honestly could have worked if they didn't try to do too much with it. They made Fred's little savant moment here too over the top with his final reaction. They should have had this part.
Yes.
And then after this build-up, have him write the list in a matter of seconds and hand it back to Velma with a simple done. The joke is, Fred is such an idiot savant at recognizing when a girl is hot. But they've confused it by adding this ending, which then makes the joke, Fred Jones is a savant at recognizing hot girls, so he can do it really fast, and also, this really fast deduction has him acting like he just exerted himself. The joke should either be, he is a genius at this very stupid thing, so he can do it quickly, or Fred exhausted himself over something that is incredibly mentally taxing when it's something as stupid as ranking hot girls. You can't do the joke both ways. It overcomplicates it and kills both punchlines. Velma thanks Fred. Okay, no. Velma says goodbye to Fred and hands him a book on feminism because he kinda needs it. Yeah, okay, I'm not gonna complain about that too much. We cut back to Daphne.
Look, kid, I know you want to find your biological parents, but as my name makes clear, I'm too short and too high to be useful.
What an oddly handled reference. Daphne's moms have locked her inside her room for her own safety, but shove Norval in as he's come to try and mimic her personality so that he can get Velma to date him. A rock comes flying through Daphne's window. Norval mentions it's not a rock, but a geode from the town's tourist attraction, a crystal mine that has since been abandoned. We cut back to Velma, who hands in the list and makes a pissy comment about how this whole hot girl murder thing is about the patriarchy or something. I don't know. It's stupid and completely incorrect in how the majority of serial killer psychology works. But it doesn't matter because Velma doesn't really care about facts. She just looks for every opportunity to make comments like this. And again, we're supposed to think Velma is a good detective when she can't even get basic criminology correct because she'd rather complain about topical issues. The mayor has an epiphany that instead of wasting money on a police escort, Velma is so awful and unlikable that if they can get the hot girls to be like her, they'd be safe from the serial killer. This would also be a funny joke at the expense of how awful Velma is, but instead we have to listen to Velma spin this into, "Oh boy, I get to release these superficial shallow girls from the sexist role of the male gaze," or whatever. Look, I don't have to explain this too much because you already know what Velma's angle is going to be here because, again, this show is so paint by numbers. It's so boring, guys. This show didn't offend or enrage me because how can I get angry at a show who doesn't believe its own dogma and is only doing the things it is to rile up its audience? But the level of boredom I experienced throughout this thing was genuinely painful. I have ADHD. I don't do well with boring. The hot girls minus Daphne show up at Velma's house for what the show is calling Uggo lessons, despite Velma's protests, and I am genuinely confused why they didn't instead sell this as a makeover joke. Like, just do all the tropes of a makeover turning a girl with glasses hot, but in reverse. It's an obvious joke, but it's weird the show didn't lean into it and instead did, well, nothing really. They ping-pong back and forth between it being reclaim your feminine power, but like in a shallow Instagram kind of way, and a be ugly and annoying, which is a lot more accurate to Velma's personality. Again, it's just a very confused joke that doesn't have a solid structure to it. The show writers know you know what this is, so it just takes for granted you already know what the joke is supposed to be, so they don't actually need to tell it. It's very weird and difficult to explain unless you've watched these episodes yourself, which I don't recommend doing. Meanwhile, Fred has read the entire book on the feminine mystique and is annoyed it didn't include any sexy shapeshifters, which, I don't know, is weirdly valid. I know it's a bad joke, but it made me nod and go, yeah, I hate it when people mistag their fics or something. Maybe I'm just desperate for something I can relate to. The feminist book has had a horrible effect on Fred though, as suddenly he finds himself more attracted to, real women, I guess. We cut back to Velma's house. Oh my god, I was joking! Anyway, makeover time. We see Olivia sneak away to put on some makeup because, get this, dressing the way I do doesn't make her feel good about herself. It's almost like some girls get their confidence and self-fulfillment by accentuating their femininity instead of basing their personal identity on the opinions of others.
Makeup is for women who want husbands. Contouring is for women who want to leech the souls of their dead lovers.
Replacing "please love me, I need your approval to have confidence" with "please hate me, I need your scorn to have confidence" is a lateral move, Velma. you're still hinging your own self-worth on outsider opinion. You've just traded unobtainable acceptance with easier to obtain hatred. You've not fixed the problem. This is all just like empty movement. Norville and Daphne have arrived at the Historical Society to learn more about their town's crystal mines. We learn that Crystal Cove had a huge financial boom in the 70s when holistic crystal belief reached new heights thanks to the New Age movement.
But by the 1980s, the crystal fad ended, replaced by the aerobics fad and the cocaine fad.
Damn it, that's actually a really good joke. Daphne feels like she's been to the crystal mines before and wonders if her parents might be tied to the mines somehow, and drags Norville along to go see for herself. Velma is all smug and ready to reveal her makeover of the hot girls, but is dismayed when she pulls off the sheet and see they'd all gone back to looking as they always do.
This wasn't an exercise in deprogramming, it's an exercise in slut-shaming. No woman should ever have to change who she is or how she dresses to not be murdered. You think every girl deep down is like you, but you're wrong. In fact, your definition of womanhood is even more restrictive than ours.
Yes, drag her, Olivia, drag her. This was honestly one of the most satisfying moments in the show for me. But, what was the point of all of this? To point out Velma as a terrible person with an extremely narrow view on feminism? Well, she's the main character, so you'd think they'd point this out so Velma can undergo some kind of change? I mean, why else challenge your main title character's moral opinions and then do nothing more with it? This isn't The Godfather where we're gonna watch somebody go down a downward spiral or something. Velma completely misses the point and has no idea how to have any concept of self removed from outside opinions, and so freaks out because she doesn't know how she can present herself as a progressive feminist to other people. Sophie is so desperate to end this talking point, she goes into labor. Velma has to try and clear the cars out of the carpool lane so the ambulance can get to her, but drawing attention to Sophie being in labor causes a crowd to form. There's a really stupid and very confused thing where Velma and the hot girls go back and forth about how they individually express their femininity as self-confidence, except this show really doesn't know how to articulate that conversation, so instead we get a lot of this.
Just like how you're all women who don't want to own shorts that cover your butt, I'm a woman who doesn't want to own it.
The writers are clearly ill-equipped to try and have this discussion, which is funny because don't let others' opinions define you is something I'm pretty sure the Care Bears covered at one point. Just because you're aiming for scorn instead of approval doesn't change anything. You're still clearly struggling with your self-identity and basing it on outside opinion. See, when you know what the core problem is, it's not that hard to put into words. However, I suspect that this show is so terrible at grasping this concept because you can never get someone's approval, so instead you settle for getting their scorn because at least it's acknowledgement, is the exact toxic mindset that these show writers themselves are living in when they made this. So when they got to this point in the episode's writing, they were unable to face that mirror and floundered in how to resolve this conflict because they were too afraid of the self-reflection that this demands. So instead, they settled on some flimsy, both our opinions are valid thing, when in fact the hot girls are fully embracing their hotness because it makes them feel good about themselves regardless of what others think. And Velma rejects conventional beauty because she wants other people to view her as a progressive, not like other girls feminist. Both those things are valid. Yeah, sure, Velma writers, keep telling yourself that. I'm sure that your reliance on other people's disapproval will do wonders for your long-term happiness and fulfillment. The hot girls do a sexy dance and lead the crowd away so the ambulance can get closer while Velma beats the shit out of people, because that is the counterpoint to using your attractiveness to your advantage. Fred spots her through his car window and immediately crushes on her thanks to the feminist book he read, which tells me he must have read one of those feminist books which are like weirdly aggressive about it. Daphne and Norville are at the crystal mines, and Daphne gives lip service to being different to everyone else because she has a high-risk personality. Norville doesn't want to go into the mines with Daphne because he hates danger and convinces her to go home. Essentially, Daphne's entire point in this episode was to stand on the stage and explain her character motivations to us instead of having to show any of it. They just peppered it throughout the episode so it wouldn't be as boring as it actually is. You'd think they'd try and establish this personality in the previous episodes, and although they kinda did with Daphne selling drugs, they made it out like that was a means to an end to get money, and was not something that tied to her having a reckless personality. So they tried show, failed at it, and then settled for tell. Sophie had a little girl.
I really hope my little girl grows up to be just like you.
Why?
Fred shows up at Velma's house, and we do that thing I showed in part 1 where Fred is now attracted to Velma, but for reasons of narrative convenience, she no longer finds him attractive. I didn't skip anything, she just stopped liking him at some point in this episode. Our mid-credits scene is one of the hot girls, Gigi, experimenting with her looks since she realized she did feel more confident in Velma's non-makeover, and she's combined it with her hot girl aesthetic into something new. This is worth mentioning because Gigi becomes a major character after this episode. She bumps into Norville, and the show sets up that they'll get together. The episode starts with Velma actually doing something relatable for once, in that she's freaking out because her friends aren't responding to her texts immediately. But rather than her having a meltdown because she thinks her friends hate her, which granted they probably do, instead she's just angry because her panic attacks have gotten so bad she can't even look at her conspiracy board without triggering one. So she needs Norville to do all the hard work for her. Why have the hallucinations suddenly gotten worse?
Shut up.
Velma complains to her dad to give her a lift to school because her simp still isn't answering her. Her dad rather clumsily works into the conversation that he's going to be at the hospital that evening to have a baby photo shoot with Sophie. Velma for some reason thinks she's in danger of the serial killer, despite us just last episode establishing they only kill hot girls, to the point of modeling them after Velma was guaranteed safety. So I have no idea why any of this is here. Yeah, this is going to be one of those episodes where completely senseless plot points happen and the only justification is because of the reason. Velma is looking for Norville at school, and there's a joke about her not even knowing what his eye color is because she has such little value in him as a human being, let alone her friend. And this is funny because bitter nastiness is the height of comedy as far as these writers are concerned. I would like to point out that Mindy has said she wanted the character of Velma to basically be herself in Suits, so that's something. The mayor and sheriff. So he is the sheriff. This show is nothing if predictable. Come on to the intercom to let know the police security given to the hot girls are no longer a thing because the cops keep getting sexually harassed by the underage girls. I'm sure there's a joke in there somewhere. Anyway, instead of the security detail, there is now going to be a 9 PM curfew because it's more convenient for this episode's plot. Velma runs into Fred. She's still looking for Norville to be at her beck and call, but Fred is now hopelessly infatuated with her and wants to prove he'd be a far better minion, saying that he believes her about her mom's disappearance being something bigger than her just running away if that will get Velma to pay attention to him. Which it does. However, despite Velma's claims in the prologue of the first episode that Fred in his weird sex van was not the person to start Mysteries Inc. and it was actually her, Fred is the one who has been doing some investigating into Velma's mom's disappearance and has found among his dad's papers that their house used to be owned by a woman named Dr. Edna Pardue, a neurologist who died in an insane asylum after conducting unethical experiments. Reminder that Velma's investigation into her mother's disappearance has so far included, I think my mom loved me so she wouldn't have run away, and yeah, that's pretty much it. I guess that can't be helped when you have a panic attack every time you try to investigate a mystery. I don't think you as a show can really try and sell a character as being a good detective when she is mentally incapable of doing any investigation without a potentially fatal meltdown. And then also have her shown up by the character you have made an effort to paint as the stupidest one in the main cast who you also want to use as a punching bag. Hey, show? The character you hate and want us to point and laugh at is doing a better job than your sociopathic self-insert. Anyway, Fred drops the line that Norval is unavailable because he's most likely making out with his girlfriend. And Velma reacts outraged to hear Norval has a girlfriend without her knowing about it. So again, Fred is shown as being better at gathering information than her. He doesn't even give a crap about Norval, but somehow knows about his and Gigi's hookup, despite Velma asking around for Norval at school literally all day. I am genuinely impressed as to how you can do the exact opposite of what you're trying to paint your character as. I haven't seen a character this badly executed since... Let's just move on. We get a good joke, which they then kill by belaboring it after its punchline. But for the smallest sliver of a second, I was amused.
Norville, you have a girlfriend?
No.
And your girlfriend is Gigi? Damn, this makes me think I could bag Don Lemon.
Anyway, Gigi has reinvented her image from prep, as NOB Darkness Dementia Ravenway would call it, and instead go for quote-unquote artsy hot, which is not what this aesthetic is at all, but whatever. The show has gotten bored with the bastardized Scooby-Doo characters and has decided it wanted to include a new character for them to write about instead. This will become far more evident as we go on, as Gigi becomes a secondary main character, and is possibly the least hateful out of the entire cast. Gigi's design is really good though, genuinely a big fan of how this character looks. Velma, it turns out, is very happy Norval has a girlfriend, because it means Velma can do even less emotional labor and just call Norval whenever she wants him to do her bidding, while Gigi can listen to him, you know, talk about his feelings and interests. However, immediately proving herself to be a better person than anyone we've run into so far, Gigi says that Norval has no self-confidence. So, as his girlfriend, she is the one who is saying Norval should spend less time with Velma and learn to build up his self-worth. Velma pouts and throws a passive-aggressive tantrum, saying how she can use Fred instead. Fred is more than happy to offer whatever help he can.
Velma, give me the chance and I can help you with anything. Well, except filling in your ethnicity on a form. I'm guessing Samoan?
It's okay, Fred. When I watched this the first time, I had absolutely no idea what ethnicity Velma is either. Like I said before, I really don't care and find it very weird that the show seems so hyper-focused on Velma's race for some reason. Yeah, I know, America, whatever. I get this is a cultural difference because I'm watching an American show when I'm not American myself, but it doesn't change the fact that as a result, I just genuinely didn't know Velma's skin color was something I should see as something worth focusing so hard on. We cut to Daphne sneaking out of her room because I assume she's still under lock and key and bikes to the crystal mines. When she gets there, a shadow figure from inside the boarded entrance grabs her and pulls her inside. Her attacker is revealed to be some people wearing Captain Caveman mascot suits who claim to be her parents. Much to her shock, because she's so brain dead she thinks the costumes are real. I don't really understand why these crystal mines have Captain Caveman as their mascot. Other than the writers of this show wanted to make a passing reference to another Hanna-Barbera character and had absolutely zero talent on how to do that in a way that makes sense. Scoob did this so much better. Daphne wants to be angry at her parents for abandoning her, but they tell her she was stolen as a baby before they disappear after making a Netscape comment. Fun fact, Netscape evolved into Firefox, which is what all of you should be using for internet security and safety, and this has been your PSA for the video. Velma and Fred are going to the Historical Society to find any information on Dr. Pardue. I'm a little confused as to why Velma thinks this information has anything to do with her missing mom, but I guess you can kind of justify it as Fred's house was the last place her phone was pinged from. It's just not very clearly explained, and the show doesn't think anybody watching it would actually be interested in the mystery. I mean, I'm not, but you could at least try. It turns out Dr. Pardue's journals, which were at the society, are missing, and the last person to check them out was Velma's mom. This causes Velma to have a panic attack.
Quick, make me laugh like Norville would have.
I would, but all I can think of right now is the gender pay gap. Is it funny? Women make 20% less than men, and women of color even less? I can't stop laughing.
We don't have a wage gap in my country. Velma almost dies, but unfortunately is revived. She and Fred go to the malt shop, where Velma is now upset that Norval has a girlfriend because Fred has proven himself not useful to her, so she sees no value in him. She decides she has to break up Norval and Gigi, and I'm sure all of you were just confused as to why it took so long for Velma to decide to do so, because it's exactly the kind of narcissistic move she is likely to pull. There was like a plot point about band sleepover being cancelled, but it's back on, so I didn't bother mentioning it. Fred shows up, although he's not allowed to come inside because he's not a band member, but he still really wants to help Velma. She wants to tell him to get lost, but it turns out she didn't bother thinking that the band members might need food for the sleepover. So Fred jumps in to save the day, saying he'll get them pizza. Daphne is googling the crystal mines and finds out that the people she met are all former employees from when it was a tourist attraction, and after it went bust, formed a sort of mole people society who rob the surface world for the resources they need. It turns out the gang were apprehended by her moms, and she was the only infant member who they then adopted.
Genetically, I'm a villain. No wonder I'm attracted to a girl who looks like a little henchman.
Norval is dropped off for the band meeting, and Daphne shows up to try and talk to Velma. She wants to tell Velma about her birth parents, but because Velma doesn't care about anyone but herself, she ignores what Daphne has to say. So Daphne tells Norval instead. But despite Norval being eager to hear the details, Velma pulls him away because she wants him to help her find her mom instead. Honestly, this is another reason why this show is so disliked by people, despite the myriad of other reasons the show is disliked by people. But it's not just that the characters are unlikable and unfunny, so you can't even laugh at them, but their unlikable characteristics are just so tiring to sit through. It's like when you stumble into an internet fight you have nothing to do with, and you think it might be entertaining to watch as an outsider, but instead of being unhinged crazy, it's just two people repeating the exact same reason they hate each other on loop, so you just get bored and exhausted after a while. Velma manages to get Norval to agree to help her with at least one clue, and, shocker, this show delivers another joke which is actually funny.
But make it fast. It sounds like Gigi just got here.
Gigi? Gigi and Velma have a flute off to decide who gets to occupy Norval's time. Anyway, the nerds are starting to get antsy about the lack of food because literally all of them need to take their meds. Velma is trying to talk Gigi into sharing Norval with her, and Gigi lets slip that Norval has something going on with his family, but she can't tell Velma what. Velma pretends she already knows what Gigi is talking about to find out Edna Pardue is Norval's grandmother because, once again, this show is written like a soap opera where everyone is distantly related or involved with everyone else. Fred arrives with the pizza, bumps into Norval, and the pizza gets run over by the sheriff. The nerds are by now going feral because this show, which is so concerned with presenting itself as progressive and hip with the kids despite not understanding any of the things it's talking about, thought it would be a good idea to make fun of people who take medication for the sake of an unfunny joke. Good job, guys. The gang decide to get food from the malt shop, but Fred points out only cops are allowed past curfew. Since Daphne lives next door, they plan to take her mom's car, but Norval is the only one who drives, so Velma does this.
In light of the recent revelation I take advantage of you, I couldn't expect you to do this for me. So, oh well, it was almost a good idea. Guess my house will just get destroyed.
I'm just showing you the clip because once again, it might look like I'm exaggerating things just because I dislike her, but no, this is really what the show is like. Norval agrees to drive, and Velma is tasked to get the keys from Daphne. Daphne wants to talk to Velma about her parents because she's freaking out, but Velma promises that if Daphne messages her what the problem is, she'll be sure to give it a thumbs up by Monday, and they drive off, not even taking Daphne despite her saying last episode that her character is apparently based on high-risk behavior. But the car speeding off opens up a manhole, and Daphne crawls down it to find a boat waiting for her.
I want to write an IOU for the food.
There's no time. You'll get caught.
Sorry, I have no choice. I mean, if we don't support a small business owned by a woman of color, who will?
Wow, Norval. You're not just a better friend than I am. You're a better person.
No. Wait. Yes.
Being a better person than Velma is not exceptionally hard. Norval isn't, though. The sheriff is patrolling outside the malt shop and Velma agrees to distract him while the others get back to her house with the food. In the cop car, she finds Norval's mom and dad who have been... You know what, I don't really want to know. And Velma uses it as an opportunity to blackmail Norval's mom for information on Edna Pardue. I just realized that throughout this entire show, Velma's investigation technique always boils down to manipulating other people into doing what she wants. Anyway, Band is fed, house is cleaned by Band, Velma's dad, Sophie and new baby arrive, Daphne meets her real parents in the cave. And that's it for the episode. I feel I should give some comment on what sort of impression it gave me, but this episode is so much mush. I genuinely can't even say if it left any impression on me other than I think Gigi looks cool and Fred is becoming more likable as we go, which I think is the opposite of what the writers wanted. Wait, wasn't Velma supposed to break up Norval and Gigi or something?
If there's one thing teen dramas get right, it's that nothing is ever actually a teenager's fault. We're all really just paying for the sins of our parents.
If this is something the creators believe, that would explain a lot. Also, mark it off your bingo cards because this is where I do my per video mention of the Breakfast Club. So Velma's point to this little "it's not my fault I'm like this, my parents just don't understand me" speech is that Velma says her dad is the worst parent ever. And normally I would take this as a typical teenager complaining about how their parents suck, but because this is Velma and she's so vocal about everything she thinks is bad, this show's writing leads me to believe that she really thinks this. So that's fun for me. The main problem is her dad can't take her to school because he and Sophie are taking maternity leave and going hiking, leaving Velma to walk to school. Fred stops next to her, asking her if she'd like to ride in his fully stocked limo, because whereas Norval's attempts at trying to win Velma's affection was guilting her into dating him, trying to use her panic attacks as justification for kissing her, and imitating the personality of the person Velma likes, Fred's methods of trying to get Velma's attention is to buy food for her when she forgot, do an investigation into her mom's disappearance so he can give her clues to work with, and offer to give her a ride when he sees she doesn't have one. Truly, Fred is the horrible, privileged rich boy who deserves to be humiliated and injured as a source of comedy while Norval gets a hot girlfriend. Anyway, Fred's dad says Velma isn't allowed to ride with them, although he doesn't really say why. Velma has a moment of reflection that her dad isn't that bad, only for the show to have her dad drive past and splash mud on her. Velma is asking Norval's mom, the principal, about her mother, Dr. Pardue, and Norval is there to try and quell Velma's hallucinations. I'm not sure why the principal can't just do it herself, but whatever. The show also tries to make it sound like Gigi is basically just as bad as Velma when she throws out a passive-aggressive comment to Norval about not fixing her pants fast enough, but if you think this is gonna be a thing that leads somewhere, it doesn't. Okay, so what follows is a bunch of backstory on Dr. Pardue, which is going to be important to the mystery, which the show can't decide whether it should be something the audience cares about or not. So in the 70s, Dr. Pardue figured out how to keep a human brain alive after it's been removed from the body. There are so many references I could put here. Oh jeez, which one do I go with? Mystery Science Theater?
Men just never listen.
Oh, I get it. It was a comedy.
Yeah.
Or Tammy and the T-Rex. Sometimes my job is incredibly difficult. Anyway, an army guy wants to use this brain swap thing because he sees the biggest threat to American society is meddling kids, which in a better written Scooby-Doo show would actually be a clever way of working that into the plot. He wants to brain swap soldiers with young people and stop them from protesting the Vietnam War. Except this show doesn't have the guts to actually mention the Vietnam War, so it just makes it about young people protesting that war is bad in a general sense. There's a plot point about the general trying to use hypnosis before the brain swap thing, but it only worked if nobody ever snapped their fingers. This is a very dumb sentence, as you can tell, but it's actually plot relevant, so I have to mention it. Also, the army guy's name is General Meeting, which as far as army name puns go is pretty weak.
Private thoughts?
I'd rather not say, sir.
How about you, Major Exclamation? Great googly moogly!
Oh, also,
He called the program the Special Covert Operations Brain Initiative, or Scooby.
Scooby? And wait, what did Scooby do?
Yeah, so Scooby-Doo is not a character in this Scooby-Doo show. Actually, come to think of it, if Scooby and Shaggy were angry at Matthew Lillard's portrayal in the live-action movie, maybe they took one look at the script for Velma and flatly refused to be involved. I am choosing to believe this is the reason for this baffling decision not to have Scooby-Doo in your Scooby-Doo cartoon, because it's the only one I can think of that actually makes sense.
Scooby-Dooby-Doo, we're missing you!
Isn't any fun without you?
Anyway, Dr. Pardue cracked under pressure, bricked up her lab, and handed herself over to a mental institution, where she eventually died.
Playing God, removing brains, that's some white people shit.
You humans are all racist.
Velma says that maybe a mad scientist who can remove brains could be connected to the serial murders in which all 3 girls had their brains removed. I mean, I assume the 3rd victim had her brain removed. We never saw her on screen, never heard how she was killed, how she was found, what her name was, what the condition of the discovery of the crime was, nothing. In a better story, you might try and work this into being some sort of clue that the 3rd murder is a red herring made by someone other than the serial killer to throw the police off the trail. But Velma manages to subvert expectations by just having it be sloppy, lazy writing.
You're actually a pretty good detective.
Compared to what? The principal tries to give Velma something that she says is the key to solving this mystery, but the second she opens the box, Velma has a hallucination. While that's going on, Daphne is still hanging out with the Crystal Mine mole people, and we find out that Daphne's dad is just using her because he needs her for something. And scene. Back with Velma, they jabbed her with an adrenaline shot. Again, why was Norval here? The principal refuses to help Velma anymore because she wants the only remaining adrenaline shot for her shellfish allergy because she wants to eat shrimp for lunch. Which is not me being facetious, that's an actual reason the show gives us. But after begging the principal to tell her anything that might lead her to her mom's disappearance, the principal tries to tell her some information, triggering another panic attack. I also want to point out that we don't get any cool animation this time, as both hallucinatory episodes just cut to black. Velma is caught in a problem loop because she won't stop having hallucinations until she finds her mom, but trying to solve her mom's mystery causes the hallucinations. Norval asks her why her hallucinations only started on the day Velma went up to her mom's car, when she had tried to solve her mom's disappearance before then, which is not a story detail ever mentioned before, and even typing it out now in the script, I have no idea if I clearly understand what he means here. This feels a lot like the writers making the plot up as they went, and when they stumbled into plot holes like this, which doesn't match the solution to the mystery they finally decided upon, they have to introduce previously unmentioned details to have the ending make sense. And not in a revealing more of the mystery way, but in a, oh, that moment we've seen before of Velma having her first hallucination after starting her investigation into her mom. Yeah, she was totally looking for her mom before that. No, we have repeatedly used this flashback to show Velma getting involved with this mystery, but we swear she was investigating it before this moment. We may not have any footage of it, but it totally happened, trust us. So, get this. Velma spontaneously decides that her hallucinations are triggered because she wants her dad's love, but he always acts dismissive when she mentions her mom's disappearance. So clearly, the hallucinations are her psyche trying to stop her from pushing her dad further away. How much do you want to bet Velma does something to try and remedy this and then declares her hallucinations cured? Anyway, then we get into...
Even though he's the one who basically taught you to be a beta?
Oh no.
Excuse me? My father is not a beta.
Oh no, please don't tell me this is going to be the running joke this episode.
Because heavy lifting is exactly what alphas like us do.
Thanks. We're helping your mom's old boyfriend move.
Back with Daphne, she's doing some bonding with her real parents, and they tell her that they turned to real crime because after the mine went bankrupt, they couldn't get the same criminal high they got from charging unsuspecting people obscene amounts of money for holistic crystals. The dad ominously says that Daphne's moms are gonna pay, before joking that he meant pay for crystals because due to feelings of global insecurity, believing in crystals is back in fashion. I would have to ask an expert on how true this is. Daphne's parents are planning to get rich off the crystal market and then move to Angola. This upsets Daphne as she's just made a reconnection with them.
Say yes, and we'll tell you why you have orange hair.
Oh my god, yes!
I smoked during pregnancy, like a lot. Like I should be dead.
Oh, this is another weird thing. This show has been lampshading the fact that Daphne has orange hair, which is weird because they've changed her race to Asian. So they keep mentioning it like they're already worried people are gonna nitpick this detail. Instead, I'm going to nitpick their defensiveness because I don't understand why they're so insecure about this detail. It's 2023. Having a non-natural hair color is almost the norm these days.
야, 머리 멋지다.
I can't decide if this is the 30 to 40-year-old writers having no idea what young people fashion is like these days, or if it's just another case of the writers' complete lack of self-confidence that they think lampshading this fact in a self-deprecating way will get people not to criticize it. The result is I am criticizing their insecurity instead, so nothing has been gained or lost from this detail other than what little brain cells I have left. Velma wants to talk to her dad, and he is all too happy to get away from taking care of the baby. They go to some other diner, which is not the malt shop, confusingly enough, which they would always go to when Velma was a kid, except now it's a strip club.
Sophie told me I can't pee in the shower anymore because that's where she bathes Amanda. Now I have to pee in the shower at school like a weirdo.
Pro tip, aim for the drain, she'll never know.
Oh, I'll try that.
Do I need to be here for this? Velma's dad is constantly distracted by wanting to focus on his job instead of Velma, or Sophie for that matter, and walks out of the club to take a call, which upsets Velma.
Oh, so you're going to work, are you? Well then call me Ernest Shackleton, because I'm headed to a poll.
Okay, this may not have made me laugh like the guillotine did, but I'm gonna call this the best line in the whole show. Anyway, Fred's there but gets dragged off by his dad so quickly I don't even know why I'm bothering to mention it. Velma starts a very pathetic attempt at a pole dance.
What are you doing up there?
I'm doing what every girl is doing up here. I'm just trying to get my dad's attention.
And one day it will work.
And now this totally progressive show has made fun of people who rely on medication for their health and said that the only reason someone would go into adult entertainment is because they have daddy issues. I'm not even someone who gets bent out of shape about this sort of thing. I just think it's important to point out the hypocrisy because it illustrates how fake and disingenuous these show writers are. Don't make me play the Daria clip again. Honestly though, this show wishes it was Daria. It begs for us to treat it like Daria. Daria was also heavily focused on a misanthropic teenage main character who tended to be rather obnoxious and how heavily she would criticize everything and everyone around her, while also being extremely self-aware that our main character's behavior and personality made her somewhat unlikable to everyone else.
Quinn wears superficiality like a suit of armor because she's afraid of looking inside and finding absolutely nothing. And I'm so defended that I actively work to make people dislike me so I won't feel bad when they do. Can I go now?
But you know what the two big differences are? The first is that Daria, despite its misanthropic shell, had a core of genuine emotion to it in what I saw described once as hesitantly hopeful. Although Daria would criticize those around her and have a lot to say about American society of the 90s, she was also often shown to have real human emotions and insecurities, which would come into play in a way where the character is forced to drop her shield for a few moments. And when she does do this, the show lets the Daria characters have their moment. And the other important reason is, Daria is actually funny.
I need you to muster all your sexiness and lure everyone away with a sexy dance. Like a shimmy into a bouncy thing? I'm not a dancer. Just show me ass cheeks going in different directions.
And what? You'll just watch and silently judge us? Pass.
But you have to distract Gary while I'm grabbing it.
And just how am I supposed to do that, Mr. Phelps?
You'll figure out something. Use your womanly attributes.
Gotcha. I'll give birth.
That'll work.
Velma's dad says he's just told Sophie he's going to be spending more time with Velma as an excuse to get out of looking after the baby. We then get a montage showing the various teens hanging out with their parents set to the song Greatest Love of All by Whitney Houston, because this show has a weird fetish for taking sincere expressions of joy and turning them into bitter, hateful irony. Possibly because the writers have been working in the Hollywood film industry corporate world so long, they have forgotten what real emotion in film is actually like.
I know who I am. I'm your son.
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Anyway, Velma is hungover, Norval is ghosting Gigi because something alpha male, and Fred's dad brought him a stripper to be his girlfriend. Turns out the person who helped Fred's dad figure out the legal junk to paying a woman for love was Velma's dad. This upsets her because she figures out he was only spending time with her so he can secretly work. Velma runs to get the box from the principal that gave her a hallucination earlier.
Are you sure you won't hallucinate?
Yes, my hallucinations were caused by my desire to make my dad love me. But after today, he's dead to me. And if I don't care what he thinks, then I won't hallucinate.
And called it. That's what, the 4th time this has happened now? It seems it might actually have taken this time because Velma doesn't hallucinate when the principal explains that Velma's mom became interested in Dr. Pardew's mansion after the Joneses bought it. Because of the reason. Whatever caused this bizarre interest led Velma's mom to find out that Dr. Pardew's secret lab was still under the mansion. Yeah, none of the logic makes sense here. It's all just so the show can actually have a plot. The principal believes that Velma's mom was killed by Dr. Pardew's ghost, to which Velma has a quip about how only insert insult here believes in ghosts. Good job, show. You managed to have exactly one accurate character trait from the real Velma. Daphne goes back to the Crystal Mines to find everyone but her dad have already left. She begs him not to go and he pulls a gun on her, which would probably have been shocking if not for the fact that the show spelled out earlier that Daphne's dad is just using her, so this scene doesn't actually have any emotional punch to it. Daphne's dad was planning to use her as insurance so her adoptive moms won't come after them when they escape. But before anything can happen, Daphne's moms show up to save her and reveal that they've been on the gang's tail since Daphne's dad broke out of jail.
We're maybe not the best cops, but we're great moms.
Please enjoy this show floundering as it tries to have a critical opinion of cops while also positive representation of lesbians. Methinks you didn't really think these characters through when you built this self-congratulatory mess, did you? Anyway, Daphne's dad has a tank top in his pocket that belonged to one of the murdered girls, but he claims he just found it and something recycling. Daphne's mom, who is also there, kicks one of the cops' camera, which causes the flash to go off and a swarm of bats to cause enough confusion for the gang to escape. Daphne is furious at her moms for using her to arrest the gang and lying about it, just like they lied about stealing her. However, her moms say they have never lied to her because they didn't steal her. She was left behind on purpose because her real parents didn't have enough room for her and their crystals when they escaped the first time.
Another lie? The only thing we've ever lied to you about is the dog.
That's why we never told you the truth.
Norval's alpha male shtick, where he's been ignoring Gigi's calls, has caused him to miss her phoning him because she almost died from being attacked by bees getting her pants out of the garbage where he threw it because the nurse was out of adrenaline shots. This sequence of nonsense events are better constructed than the show's main mystery. Velma shows up at Fred's house and demands to see the secret lab in his basement. They find the lab still bricked up, but Fred guesses one of the bricks would open the wall, but it just collapses on top of them. Velma's dad shows up and rescues her and Fred from the bricks and blah 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 something, I just use work as a crutch after your mom left us. Look, this show has no interest in any of these characters having any real human emotion, so I don't feel the need to recount any of this empty lip service when it's not going to mean anything in the long run. Behind the bricks, they find a winding staircase that leads to the abandoned lab, where they find fresh footprints and a paper that says Jinkies on it. Velma has another hallucination, begs her dad to believe her about her mom being kidnapped. He says he does, and the hallucination stops before we get any interesting animation to go with it.
My hallucinations are finally over!
Yeah, sure. Anyway, the Jinkies note was written in Velma's mom's handwriting.
So, if this was all about your dad believing you, how did making you laugh also stop your hallucinations?
Right? The point is, I don't know, but I'm sure I'll figure it out. It would be pretty lazy not to. Now, come on!
Okay, so you don't have any intention of actually explaining your fucking story. Thanks for broadcasting this and lampshading it as a joke so I don't have to waste time trying to make any of this make sense. See, this is what I mean when I say I'm not going to bother thinking about this too much, and it doesn't really matter because so many things that they bring up, they'll immediately drop or be like, haha, it's funny that you cared about that, but you were wrong to invest in it. And it gets so tiring to try and remember plot details and character quirks and character motivations, only for the show itself to mock you for remembering these details. The episode ends with Daphne's mom finding a gold chain in the mines and then being attacked by someone we're led to believe is the serial killer. So that's it for episode 6. This middle stretch really does feel like the show treading water before it gets back to the main plot. However, when it does get back to the main plot, it treats it with such little relevance or importance, and is completely inconsistent with how seriously it wants the audience to take any of this. Most team dramas these days are genuinely awful, according to Space Ninja. I don't actually watch them. But at least from what I can gather of those shows, the characters within them all treat the story they are currently in with a level of importance, even if it comes across as stupid, smug, pandering, or completely lacking in sense to the audience. But Velma constantly criticizes its own plot, its characters, and continuously breaks the pre-established rules which the show itself has put into place. On the first part, somebody pointed out that despite Clone High being incredibly silly and doing ridiculous things, Clone High established the rules of its universe that the show is stupid and ridiculous. So when stupid, ridiculous things happen, we aren't thrown off by them because it's how the show presented itself and sticks to these rules. Velma, on the other hand, constantly sets up rules for its universe, then breaks them, then acts like they're important again, then abandons them completely, then sets up new rules for the universe only to break them again. And so you as the audience member has no idea how to feel about anything or anyone in the plot. Am I supposed to be invested in this mystery? Am I supposed to be invested in these characters? Am I supposed to take the mystery as something that has a solid construct to it? Am I supposed to swallow that the mystery itself is just a bunch of nonsense which is just there to put the characters in wacky situations? Is Velma supposed to be a good detective or a detective that lets her hateful personality sabotage her? Is she supposed to be a hateful, unlikable character who everyone hates for understandable reasons? Or is she a genius who is just surrounded by people who don't understand her? Are we supposed to find her relatable or are we supposed to enjoy her suffering? Actually, let's talk about Velma's character a little before we go.
I think we should keep searching for more clues.
In Jello Apocalypse's video on why Fred is the best Scooby-Doo character, he points out that Velma is a difficult character to write. But I think I disagree. I think the truth is, show writers are just often really bad at writing the kind of character Velma is supposed to be. In the world of stereotypes, the smart nerd of a group is usually a dude, is usually super annoying, and usually has absolutely no social skills. Also, he's really good with computers and he really likes Star Trek or something along those lines. This was the stereotype for most of the 80s and 90s and probably early 2000s. Scooby-Doo came out just before the nerd stereotype was really cemented, so their smart nerd of the Mystery Inc. group was none of these things, but instead was Velma. Velma is originally portrayed as, for lack of a better word, bookish. She is smart, but not to a comical level. She thinks very practically, has almost zero fear of ghosts, monsters, haunted houses, and honestly, probably murder. And although she shares duties with Fred on unmasking the bad guy at the end, she takes an active role in explaining how the gang figured out the mystery. Like Fred, she was also discarded for most of the late 80s and early 90s, before being brought back. In Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island, she was portrayed pretty closely to her original incarnation in the small amount of screen time she gets. We see her now owning a mystery bookstore, which looks to focus more on the occult rather than, say, Miss Marple. Which alone is an interesting detail, considering she is the biggest skeptic of the group. But owning a bookstore that focuses on the occult means not only are we highlighting her being bookish, but that she has a genuine interest in these topics, even if she doesn't believe in most of them. In the live-action movies, Velma is upset that Fred was always the one given credit for solving mysteries when she was the one doing all the heavy lifting. But despite her being unhappy about this fact, her character is still presented as the bookish girl. Only now, the nerd angle was leaned into a little harder, which, considering the overall tone James Gunn was going for, is alright for a silly live-action film and its sequel. Although in the sequel we got like, hot Velma? It was very weird and clearly someone's poorly disguised fetish, which I'm not even criticizing. If you want to portray the nerdy Velma as one of the Charlie's Angels, more power to you. But it seems it's after this where the writers seemed unsure how to actually write Velma. Sometimes she's a nerd stereotype, except a girl. Sometimes she's perpetually annoyed at everyone else in the group and seems like she doesn't even want to be there. Sometimes she's barely a character. Sometimes she's used to subvert expectations that, whoa, it was the nerdy Velma who was the freaky one.
Should've known Velma was good to go. It's always the quiet ones.
Personally, I think Velma shouldn't be that hard to write. I just think that the show writers who don't know how to handle her need to make more friends with girls who write character analysis essays about the Silmarillion. It seems clear in some shows, the writers have never had interactions with smart girls unless the smart girl was extremely standoffish and insistent on her own intelligence. Either that, or they write all intelligent characters as standoffish and pedantic like this, because that's how they view intelligent guys, and then they just gender bend that kind of writing. It sounds weird, but I think the best version of modern Velma was the one Cartoon Network bumper where Johnny Bravo is upset because he and Velma were in a very serious relationship, but when he proposed to her, she was heartbroken to tell him her career came first. Also, Jello Apocalypse said that Velma being a skeptic makes her a terrible scientist or investigator. But I think I also disagree with him, at least so far as to how it makes her character behave within the group. Mysteries Inc. have at one end of the spectrum Shaggy and Scooby, the two cowards who are afraid of absolutely everything and are fully convinced ghosts are real. And on the opposite side of the spectrum you have Velma, who doesn't seem scared of anything and doesn't believe in ghosts at all. That's a perfect setup for Mysteries Inc. Hell, it's the perfect setup for most ghost shows.
I already saw people getting pissed at me in last week's debrief, and they were like, well, if this is all he's going to do every week, but what do you want from me? I have to be here for the half of the audience that doesn't buy into this. They need me, man. And we're tired of trying to explain this shit to you people. Don't care.
So how does this relate to the Velma in, well, Velma? The thing is, it doesn't. Like I said, Mindy has gone on record saying she wanted the character of Velma to essentially be her self-insert, and honestly, I'm not gonna touch that because there is nothing I could respond to that with, which isn't like really insulting. But even ignoring Mindy's self-insert, this character isn't Velma. Do you know who this character is? It's Meg. This character is if you took Meg from Family Guy and made her the main character. I'm not the first person to make this observation, but it really is true. Not that any of the characters in Family Guy have any solid foundation, since they completely change every episode depending on what the writers want to soapbox that week, but Meg is mostly portrayed in modern Family Guy as just being insufferable. She's self-righteous, she's annoying, most of her dialogue consists of her complaining about something, and also Family Guy does its best to insult her looks at every opportunity, making her out to be extremely unattractive even though she doesn't really look any worse than anyone else.
One's an innie and one's an outie.
That's Velma. That's literally Velma's entire character. So if you ever watched Family Guy and thought to yourself, man, I wish we could have every episode have Meg as the main character, here you go, I guess. Although I know Meg does have a certain kind of fan base. So I don't know, maybe there are people out there who are super into this version of Velma. There are some stans out there who will back the most insufferable characters in a completely unironic, die-hard way. I just had like a femdom blog come after me last week because I dared to call Ashley Williams a racist.
I can't tell the aliens from the animals.
I'm planning to cover the final 4 episodes in part 3, but if it runs too long, I'll do an extra part 4 because I want to talk a little bit more about the overall atmosphere of both this show and Scooby-Doo, like as a franchise. We'll see how it goes. Next time, however, we continue this parade of madness and see how on earth this show thinks satisfying conclusions are done.